One of the most devastating circumstances in life revolves around failure. When you pour your heart and soul into an endeavor, whatever it might be, and it fails, it results in a catastrophic upheaval in our lives. When we fail, life turns upside down. Everything we once thought we wanted seems to disappear into thin air. If you've recently experienced the gut wrenching effects of failure or you're going through it right now, understand that failure will make you stronger. It will make you wiser, more attuned to the things you want out of life, and more knowledgeable on just how to go about getting there. To put things into perspective, here's a list of 21 of some of the most famous failures in our time that have succeeded. They've been through failure but were able to bounce back. When you truly know their stories, you'll realize that achieving greatness isn't something that comes easy whatsoever. But it does eventually come as long as you don't give up. Number 1, Albert Einstein, one of the greatest thinkers of our time, didn't speak until he was 4 years old. He also failed his entrance exam to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School located in Zurich at 16 years old. And even his father, up until the time of his death, considered his son to be a major failure after eventually graduating from college. Einstein actually worked as an insurance salesman but quit after some time because he failed at that as well. Number 2, Beyonce Coles, with a net worth of nearly $500 million. Beyonce is one of the most successful recording artists in history. She's sold over 17 million albums as a solo artist and another 17 million albums while a member of Destiny's Child. When she was 9 years old, her group, Girls' Time, appeared on Star Search and lost. In 1996, after signing to Columbia Records, the group had huge internal drama, forcing the departure of two members. Number 3, Bill Gates has amassed a mind boggling net worth of close to $80 billion and is known as the infamous father of modern personal computing software. He brought us operating systems such as Microsoft DOS and Windows, along with wildly popular titles such as Microsoft Office's Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. However, at the age of 17 years old, his first software company called Traf O Data, which analyzed raw traffic logs, failed. Number 4, Charlie Chaplin was one of the greatest comedic minds of all time. However, he grew up in sheer poverty in the UK. His father abandoned his mother when he was just 2 years old, and he was forced to live in a workhouse at the age of 7 years old. When he was 9 years old, his mother was permanently committed to an insane asylum. Throughout his adult life, he failed numerous times, yet he's still one of the most famous comics ever. Number 5, Colonel Harland Sanders was the late founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken (KFC) restaurants. Throughout his entire life, he failed in just about every endeavor he was involved in. However, at the age of 65 years old, he set out with his famous chicken recipe and only a $105 Social Security check to his name. In an attempt to sell his franchise chicken model, 1009 restaurants rejected him before one accepted his offer. Number 6, Dr. Seuss, one of the most celebrated children's authors of all time, is also one of the most famous failures. Dr. Seuss intended to earn his PhD in literature at Lincoln College, Oxford, but failed and subsequently dropped out of school. After he wrote his first book, And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, it was rejected 28 separate times, but he didn't give up. By 1991, at the time of his death, he had sold over 600 million copies of his books in 20 different languages. Number 7, Fred Astaire's career in the entertainment industry lasted for 76 years. Grace Kelly once said, when speaking about him, that the history of dance on film begins with Astaire. However, it didn't quite start out so famously for Astaire. According to legend, He was rejected during an early Hollywood screen test when the producer stated, "Can't act, slightly bald, dances a little." Number 8, Henry Ford is the father of the automobile and quite possibly one of the most famous industrialists to have ever lived. He helped bring transportation to the masses in America and subsequently throughout the world, but his start was far from noteworthy. Ford's first company went bankrupt. His second company also went south when, after a dispute with partners, he was forced to walk away with only the rights to his name. Number 9, Howard Schultz is the American pioneer and business magnate that brought Starbucks to the international stage. However, the early years were anything but easy for this famous failure. While still an employee for Starbucks, Schultz envisioned bringing the Italian coffee shop to the masses. However, the owners were not so convinced. So, Schultz bought out the name. 217 of the 242 investors that he approached had turned him down. Number 10, Jim Carrey is a comedic legend and also a firm believer in the power of the law of attraction. But Carrey, who grew up extremely poor as a child, didn't have his fame handed to him. At the age of 15 years old, Carey actually worked as a janitor to help his family pay the bills. And during his first performance at Yuk Yuk's, a comedy club in Toronto, he was booed off stage. Number 11, J.K. Rowling. One of the most successful authors in history is J.K. Rowling. However, unlike what some might believe, Rowling's fame didn't come easy. While she didn't grow up poor as a child, as an adult, she struggled. She was a single mother living on welfare, trying to support her daughter. It took her 7 years to write the story of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and when she finished, all 12 major publishing houses rejected the book. Number 12, Katy Perry is a wildly successful singer and songwriter who had a long journey filled with consecutive failures before she reached stardom. In fact, her first album sold only 200 copies before the record label went out of business. She was subsequently dropped from two other labels. It took her nearly 10 years of failure and hard work before she released the critically acclaimed hit song I Kissed a Girl in 2008. Number 13, Keanu Reeves. What most people don't know about Keanu Reeves is that he suffered through tremendous hardships growing up. At the age of 3 years old, his father abandoned his family. His mother married and divorced 4 separate times, moving him from Australia to Canada, and he eventually ended up in Los Angeles. In 1998, he fathered a child with his then wife, who died as a stillborn at 8 months. 18 months after their relationship ended, his ex wife was killed in a car accident. Number 14, Oprah Winfrey. One of the most successful individuals of our time, grew up in sheer poverty. Born to a single mother living on welfare, her upbringing was wrought with pain and anguish. She was physically, mentally, and sexually abused during her childhood. She ran away at 13 years old and got pregnant at 14 years old. But she later lost the baby shortly after birth. She was also fired from her first job for being unfit for television. Number 15, Robert T. Kiyosaki is best known for penning the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, but that didn't happen until he was 50 years old. Prior to that, Kiyosaki endured massive amounts of failure. At the age of 30 years old, his first company went bankrupt. His next company, 3 years later, also went bankrupt. However, Kiyosaki never gave up. He kept trying and trying until he succeeded. Number 16, Soichiro Honda, the late founder of the Honda Motor Company, dealt with an enormous amount of failure. In 1937, at the time of the Great Depression, Honda founded a company in an attempt to create piston rings for Toyota. He failed having to pawn his wife's wedding ring just to stay afloat. His first factory was bombed during V. The second factory was destroyed a short time after by an earthquake, but he didn't give up. Number 17, Stephen King, possibly one of the most famous and well known horror authors of all time. Stephen King's work has been lauded and celebrated for decades, and he has sold over 350 million copies of his books. Not to mention the royalties for movies and television series based on his books. However, he threw his first book, Carrie, into the trash only later to be retrieved by his wife. It was rejected by 30 publishers until it was finally accepted by Doubleday. Number 18, Sylvester Stallone's adult life was incredibly tough. At one point, he was homeless for 3 weeks, living in the New Jersey Port Authority bus station. He was also so broke that while writing the script for Rocky, his electricity was turned off and he was forced to sell his dog for $25 just to turn the lights back on. He was also rejected by talent scouts over 1,500 times. Number 19, the Beatles are quite possibly one of the most famed bands to have ever walked the earth. They've sold over 1.6 billion albums and counting. However, on New Year's Eve in 1961, when they drove in a snowstorm to audition at Decca Recording Studios, Dick Rowe and R said that guitar groups were on their way out. 5 months later, the band got a huge break with George Martin of Parlophone, and the rest is history. Number 20, Thomas Edison is by far one of the most famous inventors in history. He holds 1,093 patents to his name. However, when attempting to invent a commercially viable electric light bulb, he failed over 10,000 times. When asked by a reporter how it felt to fail so many times, he merely stated, I have not failed 10,000 times, I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving that those 10,000 ways will not work. When I have eliminated the ways that will not work, I will find the way that will work. Number 21, Walt Disney is the creative genius who brought us the likes of Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Snow White. He created the Walt Disney Company after his own namesake, yet he faced many failures. His first company, Laugh-O-Gram, went bankrupt. It wasn't until 5 years later and with plenty of heartaches after he created Mickey Mouse did he begin to experience a small amount of success and fame. For more such videos, subscribe Tea Time, like, comment and share.